Get started. First of all, congratulations on making it to this stage of the selection process. We're excited to have you here for this exciting project. As I mentioned in the invitation, we'll have 30 minutes for the presentation. As you're getting close, and I'll keep time as we get close, I'll give a 5-minute gesture so you know to wrap things up. We will start with introductions on our end, both sides, and then when we get to you after the talk, the presentation will be yours.
Okay, great.
Okay. So again, I'm Mark Skolenko, Colliers Project Leaders, the owner's reps.
I'm Judy Tinney from Colliers. I'll be the assistant project manager on this project.
Joe Paradiso on building committee.
Ann Kelly, building committee.
Erin Mannix, town planner.
Building committee director of facilities, welcome.
Joe Valentine, I'm chairman of the building committee. Also note that the building committee members are residents in the town. This is volunteer committee.
Dave Swaley, I'm the vice chair.
Joan Walker, building committee.
AJ Miller, building committee.
Eileen Davis, building committee.
Great, well, I'm Joel Bardman, I'm with BH+A and an architect for the team.
Rachel Young, also with BH+A. I would be the project manager.
And my name is Joel Devlin, I'm the landscape architect for the team.
So we come up here and speak. I wanted to keep the team small so you could focus on the design questions, and we're the people that you'll deal with on the design and the project management. We do have engineers and they work with us on projects in town, but I wanted to give us a chance to talk here directly. I'm going to start my part. So, great RFP that you send out. There's a 2-page list of wants. I sort of whittled that down, and everybody says, the conflicting issues, you can't have what you want. So the theme of our interview is, you can pick 8 of those, and we'll give you 8. Really, what I'm trying to convey is that these projects are a matter of balancing issues, and you don't have to give up on an issue in order to get what you want. And what we bring to the team is that balance of historic, recreation, community center, and public sector projects. So that's sort of the theme of our presentation. And that balancing act, I'm going to jump right into the woods early. Why is that building in the brick is in really good condition for a 100-year-old building? And that's sort of like, well, on the one hand, you want to be energy efficient, you want to be historically honoring the building. Well, what we found is that these buildings that are mass masonry have some problems with gutters and downspouts. They have problems at the parapets. What's at the parapet? The brick isn't backed up to the heat from the building. So the heat from the building that's not energy efficient is actually drying out the wall, keeps these brick joints dry in the wintertime. The water doesn't get in there and freeze, and you have a building that's in phenomenal condition compared to what we usually get to work with. So that balancing act is really trying to look at your building and achieve your goals, but not overcome some of your other goals. So what I'm trying to get is these issues, you don't necessarily want to jump right into an energy efficient insulated wall there and then defeat some of the good things about your building. This just shows you what happens in the building. Brick wall, there's heat on it, the heat goes up there and keeps the building warm, the water never freezes. Just one other energy efficient idea to make the point. These are really beautiful windows on the back side of the building where the gym is. They're energy dogs, right? But not necessarily bad in a gym. And you can daylight that building 12 hours a day in the summertime and 8 hours a day in the wintertime and not need that artificial lighting. So is there a way to design a system that absorbs the natural light, mitigates your system, so that you create energy efficient projects plus historic projects, and they're not necessarily mutually exclusive. So we'll go through a few case studies, establish our background. As I mentioned, we focus on community centers. I manage all the community center projects, and Rachel's the project manager on a good number of these projects. And then in addition, we do historic renovations. Many of these community centers are historic buildings, but we also are we renovated Lincoln Memorial Independence Hall, we were the architects for National Park Service, the architects for the Connecticut Museum project that was up for 5 years recently, and many other historic projects. So that's why we're here from Boston, is these two prongs. You won't hear much from me for a few minutes. I'm just going to go through a few of the case studies, because what I wanted to do is take what was in our portfolio and show you why it related to your project. This is a building much like the Academy School. It's in Quincy. You can see the Wahlberg, that's Donnie Wahlberg's family, the kids on the block. His mother was a daycare provider for this building, and so they named the building after her. Not quite the historic building yours has, but similar wide corridors at Academy School. We can use those spaces more effectively in the new building. So here are the rooms butting into the corridor and using that 10-foot wide space. Here's a classroom at Academy School. That's what that looks like when it's done in a very low level, inexpensive renovation. Two more projects for me, and then you can listen to Rachel. This shows sort of our historic experience of building similar to yours, abandoned for 20 years. It's a monastery in Boston, really in poor shape, and now it looks like that. So we have the skills to know how to bring back these buildings cost effectively, and interiors and exteriors work. Pointing out, this is a laser scan of the building. So this is a 1921 school in Boston, Needham actually, similar vintage to yours. We go in, create a laser scan. That laser scan can be used for renovating and showing the clients how that building can be reused. And the crux of what we're going to show you later on is we work through alternatives of how an existing building can best be used for your particular programs. Rachel?
Sure. So I'm going to go through a few additional case studies. Everyone can hear me okay, right? Fun fact, I didn't know I was soft-spoken until I was like in my mid-20s. So Situate I think is relevant. This is a senior center. Great.
It doesn't work.
All right, fair enough. So this is a new senior center that was built on an existing campus. It was a school that the town of Situate had decommissioned. And the left half is used as a recreation department. So our task was not only building a new facility for their senior center, but also trying to create a campus that integrated all of these different departments together. Ended up taking on a food bank as well. And one of the major interventions we did was there used to be a central access and a loop for dropping off buses. And we said, can we get rid of that circulation pathway and create a campus, create a common green that can be used to connect those three different departments and also be an outdoor amenity space where you could imagine having outdoor movie nights or picnics. So this was kind of like big celebratory events. This is a project that we had done in Connecticut, just to talk briefly about heat pumps. This is something that I think we have seen is really kind of a helpful HVAC upgrade or HVAC strategy for historic buildings, namely because not only does it have an energy advantage or a sustainable advantage, but also because it eliminates some of the less sightly equipment that you might have on a rooftop. So for an historic structure, it's nice to not be able to contend or fight how do we mask this or hide it. That's kind of built into the system. Kind of a segue into the work that we have done in Connecticut. As Joel mentioned, we have been house factor for the state in the past. These are two of the projects that we did during that tenure. The Crandall House and then the Whitfield House. The Whitfield House was accessibility upgrades as well as HVAC upgrades. So I think this slide kind of just talks to the eclectic mix or the experience that we have with all different types of historic buildings, especially in Connecticut. Though I do think our bread and butter is often these decommissioned school buildings. These are the buildings that we see come up all the time in the New England area and seem to have similar stories, and we love to reinvent them. Another project that we have done close by is the beach house. This was after Hurricane Sandy, so it looked at how can we create a resilient building, that can survive the next hurricane. It looked at creating the structure, but also reestablishing that beachfront. And then this is the Broadly. So this is our newest project in Madison. If you drive by it. This is, again, multifamily, but still just talks to our connection to the town. Some other community centers, again, that are looking, that were reinventing decommissioned school buildings. This is in Kittery, Maine. And one neat thing about this building that I just wanted to highlight is I'm gonna scroll through just the next slide.
That's way in the back.
I will scroll back, apologies. Hold that, put a pin in it, because there's something I want to point out about Kittery, Maine. This slide is just to point out some of the, what we call low-level interventions or cheaper or less expensive renovation approaches. For example, this room here in the bottom right-hand corner, this is the senior center space at Kittery, and it's basically just repurposing a existing classroom. So a room that's about 700 square feet that can lend itself to a program room like you see here. So we're not talking about knocking down walls, doing anything, touching anything structural, but how can those existing spaces, which again, a 700, 800 square foot classroom space is really a helpful square footage for any member of new programs. How can that be easily and economically repurposed into a new program? This is the Suffolk Community Center down in Virginia, but again, a decommissioned school that was turned into a community center. A little newer in, not as old as your building, Brady. And these are some of the interiors that we wanted, again, to compare to what you have, just so you could get some ideas for what a minimal renovation might look like. So here's a photo of the classrooms at the Academy School, and then this is a classroom that we did at Suffolk. And then similarly, this is the gym currently at Academy. And then this is the gym that we had at Suffolk. I think one issue that we do have that we run into all the time with these schools is that they were often built higher than grade with like these monumental stairs to get into these lovely celebratory entrances. And they're obviously not accessible. They're not great for a large portion of our community. And so how do you deal with those changes in elevations? I think one pro is that your building is all at one level. You don't have an addition that is like 4 feet down that you have to deal with. That's obviously very helpful. But so this is an example of a project we had done for Chatham, where again, you had that higher entrance monumental stair at the front. We introduced a exterior and external elevator that helped us with seismic upgrades, because doing an internal elevator also often triggers structural requirements, but doing something on the exterior makes it a little easier in that respect. But that also helped us mitigate that grade issue that we were having. And then this is just a floor plan of that Chatham Center. And again, you can see the elevator and core suite that we put on the outside of the building to the rear, so it's not visible from the main pedestrian or the main vehicular approach. And again, because we're applying it, if you will, as an addition to the exterior of the building, it just helps us with the exterior, with the structural upgrades that you might need otherwise. So then these are some additional images of your center and spaces that we renovated at Chatham. Chatham also had a underutilized basement space. I think that oftentimes you're contending with the low heights that you guys have, and what can you put in there? And so our strategy was to say, to prioritize spaces, to say which are the most important, should be at that common piano nobile level, which ones can be down in the basement that are less used, are less important to the community. So we work with you to help prioritize what are the spaces that you think might be suitable for that basement space to take advantage of it, because it's a lot of square footage. And I think it might be useful to say, oh, it's basement space, it's not pleasant. Some other interventions we did down in Chatham is we introduced light wells so that we can have full-size windows. So it does feel less like a basement space, and you can get that natural light in, which I think is really helpful. So initial thoughts. So some approaches that we have to design that I think make us unique is we really believe in community engagement. I always like to say I'm from Boston, where you get what you get, you don't get upset. So when I work for other towns, I'm delighted to be working in like a democratic community engagement process where I get to do what I call reflective listening, where I get to listen to what you or community members or any stakeholder might have to say, and then work on how I can make sure that I'm communicating that I understand what they are saying. I think having that rapport and transparency and connection to, again, any stakeholder, whether it's a city official or a community member, is really important to make these projects successful. I'm going to talk briefly about some visioning and trends we have, which I think we really have our thumb on that pulse, if you will. So I think it's helpful to discuss. Related to that is programming and right sizing, and I'll get into a little more detail about what that means. Likewise, flexibility versus purposeful spaces. That's something that I think we've got a good hand on. I'd like to explain that a little further. And then connection to the outdoors, which I think is really important for your site, because you have a fantastic location in terms of the main park that you access and share with the other community buildings that are surrounding you. So really creating that campus. So stakeholder engagement, I think I kind of already went into this, but this is just an example. This is the Milton Teen Center right outside of Boston. This was a teen center. So you would think that all of our engagement would have been talking to, say, like parents of teens, but we were really deliberate in how we define stakeholder. And even within a teen center, which you think, 13 to 18, we said, wait, let's talk to the preteens. Let's talk to like the 10 to 13-year-old set. Let's talk to the actual teenagers, and then let's talk to their parents. So we said, those are 3 groups we think are really important to engage, and how do we engage them to meet them where they are? So we had one type of meeting for the parents, which is more of a traditional setting where we did a presentation. For the teens, we met them at the high school, and for the littlest grades, we did like an arts and crafts charrette, where we basically gave them a whole bunch of materials, like almost like a collage exercise, and said, design your center and show us what you want. And it was really enlightening, and it was a lot of fun, and you got different perspectives from each one of those groups. So I think that when we're doing stakeholder engagement, it's really important to identify who is everyone. Are we really picking up on all those different stakeholders, and how are we approaching them? Some trends that we're just seeing in terms of teen centers is really multifunctional spaces that can double as different uses for different needs. So a black box theater that might be able to be used for wrestling when it's not being used as a theater, or a common space that really can take on different uses as a hangout space, or for tables, or ping pong tables, or video gaming. A program room that can not just be for a sewing class, but maybe it's for a technology class too. We like to go into room utilization in great depth, because I think it's really important to understand that the administrative controls for a space as well as the design controls. And what I mean by that is we can give you all the space you need, but we want to make sure that those rooms are used in a very efficient way. And so it's going through the exercise of saying, this room is going to be used for these different activities during the day. Does that mean I need another space because I have a similar activity at the same time? It's going through that exercise to really understand what right sizing this space is going to mean. And I think that's really important when you're talking about being conscious of budget. Types of spaces that we're seeing, these are the trends I was talking about. So maker spaces are very popular at the moment. We're doing that increasingly in our centers. Commercial kitchens that also double as program rooms. So they're a teaching kitchen where you can teach cooking classes, but also have the capacity to serve as a catering kitchen or used by a non-lay professional. Cafe areas where they're just an area to congregate, but it really feels like a warm and fuzzy living room kind of space. Definitely fitness places. If the budget can bear professional equipment, those are very popular spaces with our communities. That flexible space I alluded to earlier. And then the last one I just wanted to hit on is in the center, the winter greenhouse. This is not specifically a trend that we're seeing replicating out across different centers, but it's just to say that we have worked with centers where they have very unique needs. This happens to be a community center outside of Boston, in the town of Randolph, where they specifically asked for a greenhouse. And so we worked with that community to say, okay, what does it mean to build a greenhouse? How do we do this? We've never done it before, but we're like, let's do it. So I'm sure that when we have conversations about programming, unique needs will come up, and we're ready for that challenge. The flexible versus purpose-built, I think it's just important, again, when designing spaces efficiently, to understand, is this a space that's always going to be used for one purpose, and therefore it cannot be used for anything else? A good example is like a pool room or a billiards room where you have big furniture that can't be moved to the side, versus a multi-purpose room that can be used for any sort of activity. And understanding, again, it depends on the community. Everyone has different approaches to this, but it's just having a conversation about what is really important to you. Do you want this room dedicated for X, or do you want it to be flexible? I talked about this already, the idea of the commercial kitchen that can double as a teaching space. This is just two examples from different centers we've done. And then the atrium space. What do we do with this lovely space that you have? This is a real opportunity. Is that our cafe area? Is that our outdoor living room space? Does it have some kind of fantastic sculpture in it? Joel's going to talk more about his ideas for the plan of the space, but I think we really see that as a central focus for the building. And then lastly, this is just a fantastic center. This is the Kittery that I was trying to get to before, so forgive me for going out of order. But in Kittery, we had a multi-purpose room that they really wanted to have a theater for. And so we worked with them to figure out how to do this collapsible seating so that they could have a gym that doubles as a theater. And I think it really satisfied that need. Okay. Did you want to take over?
So that's a nice segue to our thoughts about the project, and then they begin to, at one end of the building with your gym. As Rachel mentioned, we could do that collapsible seating in the gym. We love the fact that your senior center's nearby. Pickleball is the fastest growing sport and seniors love it. In fact, most of our senior centers these days are building gyms with them. So the gym space can take on a lot of different programs, from recreation to activity spaces. And it can also serve an adaptive for physically challenged, for kids that don't have other spaces to go. You could do a different type floor in there that isn't necessarily a basketball floor, where you can have bicycles, hockey, adaptive wheelchairs, whatever. So there's many opportunities for that space that we would go through. The other end of the building is the other way that we would start thinking about the project. That's sort of what we call the character defining end. It's really a great little entry. It has this sort of ticket booth that you can't believe exists anymore. And the historic doors are beautiful. The whole approach is nice when the taqueria is not there. And then it sort of brings us to this idea of, you have this character defining entry. We have the main road, we have parking. You know, how do I get in the building? And as Rachel said, it's up half a level. Do we try to get in the front door? Well, we can't really. If we come in here, we can't get to the second floor that easily, because you need a lift to get from here up. So we sort of think the entry wants to be on the side somewhere. And the question we would explore with you is, where does it go on the side? Does it go sort of in the back, which would, you'll see when Earl talks about the site, maybe relates more to your parking? Or does it go more in the front, where it relates more to the street and the historic district and the pedestrian activity? So we would want, the purpose of this is to show you how we would work, not necessarily a design, but I showed you the programs that could be on the gym, and Rachel showed you the program that could be in your multi-purpose room, that either some support that could have a audio-visual studio for kids that are maybe performing in the gym, the performance space. We thought it would be really great to put offices on this floor so that if strangers come in the building, you always have some eyes of staff looking at your building for supervision. So you'll see that our idea would be to move more of the multi-purpose rooms upstairs. This put the entry right at the far end. It's really nice. You come in, you can go to the gym, or you can go to the program space. So it splits the building nicely. It's a little bit expensive to do it, and as Rachel said, that could trigger seismic improvements, other structural considerations. I mentioned that. So, oops, did I skip the, I think I might have skipped the scheme. Oh. Yeah, here we go. This puts the entry on the street side of the building. You could convert that corner into an exhibit space. Entry brings people into the performance area. You still have the performance space. That performance space could be really great. It brings people in a little bit further from the gym. But again, the elevator's outside of the footprint of the building. We have to deal with the historic commission, but it's easier to build the elevator outside the building than it is to build inside it. So is it something that you would want to consider? So again, the offices are on the same idea. Puts the community spaces on the second floor. again, our community centers always have staff on every level. So there's always an eye if a person has a heart attack or falls or there's something going on, there's always a staff available on your upper level. And Rachel was sort of prepping you, your old community, cafeteria space could be the gaming areas for the youth or flexible spaces. Maybe the kitchen's in the top corner. But the problem with the basement, from what I can see on the walkthrough, is I couldn't really quite figure out how to get from one side to the other. So you either, we think, pick one side or the other. There's 53,000 square feet of space in the building. And given the budget, it might be good to maybe not worry so much about the basement and focus as much energy as you can. So if there are more spaces that are storage, we don't really like to put staff down in the basement if we can avoid it at the lower level. So this would be something to really go through and discuss with you. And that gets us to the site and Earl will. One thing that I think really works well in Madison is you have such a vibrant downtown. And part of it is because you can park easily and the parking relates to the fronts of the buildings. So that just begs, where is the entry? Is the entry here or is the entry there? You put the entry here in the back, it doesn't really relate to the street, but there is this area here that could be more developed for parking. And that really brings a couple of thoughts into the project. Are there parking spaces around the site that could have shared parking agreements? For when you have a big town meeting in the gym, you have shared parking. Early.
And I'll just be a second. With some observations we've made, the site's tired. There's a lot of pavement, excess pavement. Even on Academy Roadside, there's pavement between the sidewalk and the building. Obviously, it was a school at one time. So we would look to repurpose some of that pavement, maybe introduce some sustainable design thoughts, whether it's infiltration, whether it's porous pavements. We really think that the site needs to be developed into a campus so that it feels as if each of the pedestrian paths have purpose, that it's a safe environment for pedestrians as well as for and logical vehicular circulation. We spent many years over the past 30 years working on schools, which is 90% circulation and safety. So when you work with a community building, that's our first look is how do we make this as safe as possible while providing as much parking as possible, while meeting the scope and meeting the age groups, right, of the people using it. But we really feel that there should be some sort of unifying element in the back that kind of creates a campus, a safe, again, pedestrian campus for these users. And it would also be great from our perspective is if School Street got worked into this campus so that we could utilize street furniture, fencing, old world feel materials, granite posts and such to kind of tie that whole corner together and maybe a little bit more of a stronger connection to the War Memorial and the James Madison sculpture and memorial out there, just because there's some pedestrian things out there. The crosswalks aren't great, they're not well marked. There's really no traffic calming, and we seem to have a lot of opportunities to maybe take some advantage of some on-street parking that might alleviate some space in the back and allow us to do some of those sustainable design techniques such as infiltration, biofiltration, rain gardens and such to try to alleviate the storm system. And the last point I want to make, it appears as if, the grass areas are tired, very compact, a lot of roots. It'd be nice to kind of reinvigorate those and maybe come up with a strategy that's less maintenance for town staff and utilize materials that don't require as much maintenance as they might. Thank you.
Well, you want to know about the cost. In the last year in this high inflation, we've had 4 community centers all come in right at the budgets. I'll talk about the strategy and the methodology and the Q&As, but the estimate or the budget for the actual is on this chart. It's a really challenging time and every month it changes and it gets worse. So it's been an interesting process. The schedule you have outlaid is fine with us. I wanted to mention, and Rachel was going to do this, but in the interest of time, she's your day-to-day contact. Our team is the team that did the Bradley, that did Hammonasset Beach, and had worked with us on the Connecticut historic project. So we have a experienced Connecticut team. We're really the outsider to that. And I hope that the little scale explain what we bring to the project in terms of our skills, all the different programming, community center, and it's hard in a half hour, but we're very passionate about the programs. We love to work on these things. Rachel and I have been doing this for quite a number of years, and we're a pretty good team of beginning and finishing a project. So we'd love to work with you, and thanks for your time.
Thank you. We have time for questions.
Yep.
We can stay up here, or should we?
You can stay up there. No. If you move around so the people on the
I
end
know,
can,
Sorry to bias one side or the other.
I can see it. And we'll start with Dave. We'll go around the room this way.
Thank you. In regard to quality control, especially with in the construction phase, what do you see your role or important things to look at?
So I'm involved all the way through. We're not the type of firm that throws things over the wall for different phases. So I'm your project manager for schematic design, design development, construction documents, and construction administration. That's the way our office works. So I think that helps immensely because you're very intimately knowledgeable of the project. Oftentimes, project manager even works on writing the specs as well. So it's really understanding what those contract documents are. But in terms of quality control, I think it really is primarily about having a good relationship with the contractor and the subs, being often out of the site frequently and often to establish those relationships. I think they're really key. And I think understanding, what their comfortability level is with different things and how they work. Maybe they're a contractor that likes to do a mock-up versus shop drawings, like understanding how it is that they understand the project so that you can meet them there and help them. Because the most important thing is for them to understand what you're expressing in the documents, right? You want to make sure that, again, to go back to that idea of reflective listening, that when they're building it, that's their reflective listening exercise. That's them saying, I understood what you wrote down there.
How often would you see yourself on site?
At least once a week, at least. And it really depends, when things are getting up, but at least at a minimum.
Thank you.
Okay, so I'd like to have an understanding of what you think of some of the challenges in this specific project and some of the opportunities as well.
Sure. I think some of the challenges are, start with challenges. This obviously is a building that's been vacant for a while. So we see it's really important to get in there and, for example, our hazardous materials consultant to really understand what those costs are going to be, because those can be quite significant for a building of this period. Really getting in there and doing exploratory demolition to understand, to try to get ahead of any latent conditions. You really want to understand the building. Likewise, getting a hold of historic drawings. The laser scan that Joel was talking about, doing a laser scan so you know that you're not going to have any bust. You're relying on the most recent technology and not someone hand measuring something and transposing a number incorrectly. I think those are really critical. Does help you overcome those challenges. The opportunities is, this is a fantastic site. It's a great location. The opportunity to create that campus, the connection to the other municipal buildings that you have already there, like you have here. You have a campus here right now. And to recreate that in the downtown area and connect those different groups together. Like a lot of times we do intergenerational centers, and I kind of see this as something similar, where you have the more youth-oriented center, but very close by to the VFW and the senior center, and creating those connections.
You touched a little bit on the atrium area, and I just wanted to explore that idea a little more. What were your sort of thoughts? Are you thinking that sort of stays open? Are you thinking that becomes a foyer?
Courtyard.
Sorry, the courtyard.
Yeah, I think in the world of worlds, we'd love to put a skylight over it and capture that space in the middle of the building so that it's climate controlled. It may not be affordable to do that, but that would be something that we would explore. And if you could, in the entry that moves the entry back by the basketball court, that would be, you would enter the building, there'd be a vestibule, and that would be sort of a foyer or controlling focus to the building. And that's where it could be an exhibit space, or it could be the maker space that's a little bit needs higher ceilings, or something unique in there. But I think it's gonna depend on the budget, whether you can make it an interior space or whether it's an outdoor. I don't know that you need extra space. It's a big building, but roofing over it would have some nice advantages from a water control and moisture. But we see it as when you have a town meeting or a theater event in a gym, it would make the perfect anteroom where you could set up a bar and sell soft drinks. You could sell snacks. The gym right now just opens during a corridor. If you had that space available, it would make the gym all that more usable for performing arts or, a team band challenge or any of those kinds of things that could be really cool in that space.
Great, thank you.
I'm gonna pass.
Can you talk to your design review process and how you would manage that, interact with this committee and the public or the stakeholders?
That's a good question. I think, again, every town is unique. So I think it's a good conversation to have at a kickoff meeting to say, again, to be identifying those stakeholders and reviewing what the town process is. I know we have familiarity with Bradley, but understanding, for example, who are the authorities having jurisdiction? If we're going after historic grants, is there a review process for them? Is there a long lead time for that review process so that we can make decisions in a timely manner? I think that there is no harm in having frequent reviews, if you will, like breaking down a project into deliverables that aren't just schematic design development, and construction documents. Like, we're doing a project right now that one of our deliverables is 50% DD. And if you had asked me when we started this project, but what does that even mean, 50% DD? It seems a little silly, but I've actually found value in having that intermediary deadline because it allows for a very coordinated, consolidated set at a critical point in the design that can be reviewed by the town. And it's not them saying, it just helps with that process. So I think having those intermediary deadlines has value.
I think early on, the idea of the two entryways was just to say, from a design review, our idea is to show you alternatives, not to necessarily say this is the design, but here's everything we can think of how you could solve the problem, what works best for the building community.
And our contract typically lays out, like, we're gonna give you 5 options or 3 options or 2 options. But when we get in there and find that, we gave you 2 options and now we have to look at a 1A and a 2A and a 1B and a 2B, that is fine if that's where the natural progression of the discussion goes.
So you've said a couple of these already, but I'm wondering if you could describe a problem that you've encountered in a similar project and how you worked to resolve it. What was your process?
For what type of?
A problem that you've encountered.
Just any lessons
kind of
learned.
problem in a similar project where a community center using historic building, et cetera.
I'll jump in on one. It was sort of in the stakeholder process, a community group came forward and said, we want a performing arts center, and we had $3.5 million on this 65,000 square foot building. And that's where I learned the problem is never to say no, because we started looking at it and they helped us find that seating that pulls out of the wall. And we were able to, for $250,000, get the seating, curtains, lights, and an audio system in a multipurpose room to create the Star Theater in a community center. So the problem I learned there was don't say no, because there's things that you can always learn on a project. Now, there may be technical problems, bathrooms or.
Now, I was going to talk about, because we are going through this volatile inflationary period, value engineering. I think that's what's come up most recently as a real challenge. You have projects that definitely have a limited budget. Our task is to work within the budget. We are not the type of architect that ever presents something that we know is going to bust. But regardless, you work within that budget and then you're surprised to see that you actually have to accommodate, increased costs. So that value engineering, we've been going through it a lot lately. And I think that the lessons learned is to really collaborate with the end users on what some solutions could be. And I'll give 2 examples on a center we're working on right now. It's a very large community center. with different user groups. And the two most expensive issues that we're dealing with right now for value engineering are the furniture costs and the audiovisual costs. Those are quite significant for a large center. And some of the conversations we've been having are, can we repurpose furniture? How does that help us? For example, we have a lot of offices that need little reception chairs, and can we reuse some of the chairs that they have currently? It's good from a sustainability standpoint, and that's a great place to reuse furniture because it's not the most, it's not your multi-purpose room. It's not the place that you walk into and make a first impression. And so it helped us, you know, reduce costs there. And then for audiovisual, the conversation that we've been having is, rather than fit out every room, can we create a few key rooms? Again, prioritizing those rooms that are the most multifunctional, that you think you will get the most out of, to really fit those out to the A+ level, and then fit out the infrastructure for all the other spaces, so that when money presents itself from fundraising or future appropriations, they can go back and fit out those rooms properly.
Thank you.
This has been very enlightening. Thank you very much for coming, but I'll give you a last question in the 1 or 2 minutes that are left in your time period. What is the one thing you'd like to leave us with that would make us pick your firm?
Well, I'll go back to the beginning, and I think that, you know, that there's a great RFP with a lot of needs. And I think that what we can bring to your project is, we have a lot of enthusiasm. We want the project to happen. We want it to open. And we can help you balance what your competing needs are without necessarily saying you can't have a geothermal system, or, as Rachel pointed out, you can't necessarily fit out every room with audiovisual, but maybe we can fit out 2 at an A+ level. So I think our experience brings us the ability to balance your project and bring it to conclusion and have it get built and open up.
So this is a good way to end. Start from recap the beginning. Reinforce your main point.
I was telling Rachel on the way down, you know, I can't come in and say that we're a better architect or we have more experience. We don't, you know, there's a lot of really great restaurants downtown. You pick one to go to and the other 7 are not getting your business, so you have to choose.
And just to piggyback on what Joel said, is we are your team. So the team that's interviewing today is the team that you'd be working most closely with. Joel is very involved in the project. Joel and I have been working together for 10+ years now. So we have a very good system going on, and we would be your day-to-day contacts.
That's what I.
Sorry.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
I love the no maintenance. Low maintenance.
Wait in the future.
Really, your ears had to perk up.
Yeah, exactly. Facility guys in.
Sorry. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Thank
you very much.
Try.
Okay.
I'm not familiar with that printer. I'll give it a shot though.
Okay.
Thank you.
Give it a shot. Well, Al, thanks for buying us lunch.
So he give you an elbow?
I think you're being sarcastic. I don't think you paid.
Well, enjoy it. You've earned it.
I think that's what he said he was gonna do. I haven't really figured out who paid yet, though.
So the high school teams, you know, if they do away meets, they'll get food for the kids, you know?
Oh, they will?
And, yeah, the one team my daughter's on now, they shied away from what's cooking because of the cost. But now they figured out that Bradley Wall doesn't open until a certain hours, they can't order it. And so it backfired. So now if they have like an afternoon meet or whatever, they can't get the food, like they have to eat when they come back. So they're,
That was the whole
I think they're regretting the what's cooking.
With high school, was that you know, you had to plan ahead for your away games
Yeah.
and what your, you know, what your meal was gonna be.
Right.
Took it to the next level once we got to high school.
Even my daughter does, she got to order what she wanted.
I know. That's what they, it was nice.
You have a freshman, right? Is
I
that-
do, yeah, my daughter did not.
Yeah, my daughter was a freshman.
Okay, yeah, she did volleyball and is doing fencing now.
Oh, nice. My daughter did swimming and diving, and then she's on the gymnastics team now.
Cool, my youngest wants to be.
Yeah, the hand team made the, it was on Channel 8 the other day. It's pretty cool. And they used the video from my daughter's routine just happened, you know?
You're welcome.
Yeah, she's
We
on
might as
Channel
well
8.
get our plates if you're.
There you go. Great.
That's when my daughter was complaining, she's like, you have a pool. She's sick of taking the van to Brant to practice for diving. So then you can't host
Briefly
school
pause
meetings because
recording
they're outdoors.
until our next.
So you have to-
Not the one to see on the recording.